And they set up a defense fund for Luigi Mangione.
Sean, it's all wrong. But Sean,
didn't Gavin Newsom do it?
Sean, when you have an administration that puts out what this guy puts out and says what he says, it makes people angry. It does. What do you mean, no?
Gavin Newsom admitted he was praised for finally having some balls.
Be angry, be pissed off, but violence is never acceptable, ever, full stop. And there's no equivocating, there's no, they might be angry.
I agree.
No, never, never, never.
I know, Sean, but it's the problem is you guys only say that.
Preaching to the choir.
You only say that when it's about the other side being the problem, never when it's you as the problem.
No.
Chris Cuomo goes head-to-head with Sean Spicer on News Nation as the conversation heats up around political violence, the role of the media, and the widening divide in U.S. politics, with Cuomo pressing hard while Spicer attempts to stand firm under increasing pressure. And the exchange quickly grows intense as they argue over accountability, the power of political language, and the point where messaging starts to become risky. So let's jump in and see how Chris Cuomo takes on Sean Spicer on News Nation.
We all know about what DJT 100 was supposed to be about, right? It was this ambition of, let me see how many people on both sides I can get to like what I'm about in this administration. But this works better. This dividing works better, and it's easier. And that's what gets rewarded within the parties and online by the algorithms. Why would you try anything else?
Yeah, respectfully, as a friend and a mentee as well, I disagree. It's not just reward, it's factual. I mean, look, I don't like to use events like this to score points, and I get maybe in that way we agree. But the reality is that Caroline was absolutely right. I mean, look, these guys are the first ones to point fingers. For Barack Obama, the President of the United States, to put out a tweet and say, we have no idea what the political leanings of this person are, his motivations, is patently false. The guy wrote a manifesto that was very clear about what his motivations were and what his intent was. So when we get gaslit, and Chris, I know that you and your family have been involved in politics, so I'm sure this might resonate with you as well, but I've dealt with that vitriol. I've had people come to my house. I've had people make threats. Too. And so, I know, that's why I'm saying I think you identify with this as well. But Geraldo's the only one that people just love. So maybe he doesn't get this the same way.
True.
But look, here's the thing.
Because I've been around for 100 years.
I think that you can say what you will about the president's rhetoric, right? And there's things that he said that I don't fully agree with, or how he expresses himself. Got it. But at the end of the day, Caroline was right. When you tell someone that they are a threat to democracy, a threat to this country, a threat over and over again, what do you think's going to happen? People are finally going to say, well, if that's a threat, I need to get rid of the threat.
You're right about half of it. And I'll say it this way, and I'll put it to Geraldo.
That's better than I did in high school, Chris.
But hold on. If you switch the R and the D, and this was Joe Biden who says the things that Donald Trump says on a regular basis about you, about me, about immigrants, about any group, put it in. They would go crazy. Sean's head would explode. But he's very mild because it's about Trump. Levitt is right about half of it, not all of it. And that's why nothing changes.
I feel badly that you're...
Look, can I just ask this? Can you guys just agree, though, there's a difference between mocking somebody and saying that they're a horrible person and whatever, and telling someone that they should be eliminated? Like, there's a difference to me.
Wait a second.
Nobody's saying he should be eliminated.
You saw the two sides to Donald Trump on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday night, when he came back after the traumatic event, he was magnanimous. He was inclusive. He was wonderful. And I said, wow, this may be something that will cause a new President Trump. And then the next day with Norah O'Donnell, he practically called her a slut and, a disgrace and a horrible person and this and that. I mean, things that you would never think in your real life to call anyone. But knowing him as long as I know him, hold it a second. Knowing him as long as I've known him, I reconcile myself. That's who he is.
What really stands out in this exchange is how much of today's political tension is driven not so much by real policy disagreements, but by the incentives built into modern media and online platforms, where engagement-focused algorithms, as research from groups like the Pew Research Center has found, often boost emotional and divisive content far more than calm and thoughtful discussion, creating a cycle where outrage gets attention while balanced views fade away. And there is also a clear, real-world trend behind worries about rising political language, as the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center has consistently reported that most political violence cases come from personal frustration, online radicalization, and a sense of ideological conflict, rather than direct orders from public figures, which makes the overall tone of national conversation very important, because repeatedly presenting opponents as serious threats can increase fear and intensity among unstable individuals.
He's mercurial, he's thin-skinned, he's entitled and aggrieved. And those are things that he is.
Imagine what your wife would say if you had talked like that in an interview.
Oh, my God, she wouldn't.
Man,
but there's a difference.
She would be the cold shoulder to beat the
all right,
bear.
go ahead. Go ahead. Time in. What do you got?
I'm just saying, like, look, I think that calling somebody a jerk or disgusting or whatever, okay, yes, I don't generally speak like that, but that's a very different thing than saying someone is a threat to the country and a threat to democracy.
He calls
I want to get rid of
a
threats.
threat to the country and democracy all the time. Sean, I don't have enough time to list it. And you know this. And you're right. People speak about him in a way.
It's funny, Chris, because
that it
all
would be
the,
nice
all
if
the
they
assassination attempts seem to go in one direction.
He's in
Right?
power.
It's Charlie Kirk, it's Donald Trump 3 times, it's Steve Scalise. Okay,
He's
I'm
in
just
power.
Saying, you
He's
notice
in
that
power.
every one of these people in the Trump administration needs a security deal, staff. No other press secretary in history, except for those who served Donald Trump, needed a Secret Service detail.
Sean, do you believe that the animus directed towards this administration has nothing to do with what the administration directs towards the people?
I don't know that there's an equivalence. Sometimes the language is inflammatory. But there's a difference when the Democrats in power tell you that there's a threat and they must be eliminated.
But where did it come from, Sean?
But why don't you compromise, Chris, and say you're for the ballroom? The guy should have a Purple Heart. He's been the victim of assassination attempts 3 times. The ballroom makes sense pragmatically.
I don't care.
Suggests that he's
I don't care about
he's right.
the ballroom.
Maybe he's right about that.
The idea that we're talking about.
If you don't care about it, why don't you say you're for it? Or you're okay with it?
I'm okay with it. I don't care about the ballroom. You know, people aren't looking for me what I'm okay with, what I'm not. What I'm not okay with matters more, which is we're going to talk about whether a ballroom is the solution. Not that you have another mentally ill person who is able to get access to a weapon and get inside and try to commit a mass act of violence. But we won't discuss any of that. But a ballroom is the fix.
Caltech. I mean, this guy it's an intriguing story. I'll admit that. It's a
mentally ill
had a guy
people
go from being
anybody.
honor engineer,
he has a mental illness,
to this kind of breakdown.
But you don't. But stupid and sick do not, can be reconciled.
People have their own demons. You know, it's hard to reconcile that any one stimulus is why. What's the catalyst? Why did this person become a crazy person? You talked about
wait, they were
the massacre of the children
guys,
up in Connecticut.
Yeah, but hold on, Sean. You want to say we know from the manifesto why he did it, and you're right. But since when do we start reading these manifestos from someone who's obviously deranged as proof of premise?
What really stands out in this exchange is the growing frustration with the way political violence is discussed in the U.S., often blending real security concerns with party-driven talking points. And from a factual view, incidents involving political figures have raised alarms in agencies like the United States Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, which has consistently pointed out that most attacks come from individual radicalization rather than any coordinated political orders. And that difference is important because it shifts attention away from just rhetoric toward wider online spaces and access to weapons. Well, there is also a clear pattern in how major incidents are understood in real time, since early versions of events often compete before investigations are finished. And as shown in cases reviewed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, initial beliefs often do not match the final conclusions, which is why quickly blaming one cause can ignore the more complex mix of personal grievances, mental health struggles, and online influence. And another factor that is often missed is how polarization itself increases the feeling of hostility, as research from groups like the Pew Research Center shows that many Americans now see opposing political language as a serious threat, even when it is only rhetorical. And this cycle makes it harder to separate criticism of leaders from what people see as attacks on democracy. And in the end, the real issue is not whether people disagree, because that is normal. but whether public conversation can stay focused on verified facts instead of emotional reactions that can distort the real causes behind political violence and instability.
But the question, Chris, here's my point, though. It's why. When he is told over and over again why, when the Democratic Party tells people that violence is okay, when the CEO of United Health can be killed in cold blood, and they set up a defense fund for Luigi Mangione.
Sean, it's all wrong. But
No.
Sean,
Didn't Gavin Newsom do it?
Sean, when you have an administration that puts out what this guy puts out and says what he says, it makes people angry. It does. What do you mean, no?
Gavin
Be
Newsom
angry,
admitted he was
fine.
praised
Be
for
angry.
finally
Hold on.
having some balls.
Be angry, be pissed off, but violence is never acceptable, ever, full stop. And there's no equivocating, there's no, they might be angry.
I agree.
No, never, never,
Yeah,
never.
I know, Sean, but it's the problem is you guys only say
Preaching
that.
to the choir.
You only say that when it's about the other side being the problem, never when it's you as the problem.
No. Do you know what? Here's the deal. I've said this for every circumstance. Violence is never, ever the answer, okay? You think about this. How many people on the left set up a defense fund for Luigi Mangione that hit 7 figures? Because why did no one say anything during the BLM riots and destruction? Because violence is always going to be acceptable to folks on the left if it's in pursuit of a greater good. They do nothing to call it out, right?
What about Stephen
Chuck
Miller
Schumer
in that
said,
language,
we're coming to get you,
incendiary
Kavanaugh.
I mean, we have heard more ugly things out of this administration, but you make the right point, which is the one that I practice.
Ugly is different than threats. Ugly is different.
Look, he started the chance of lock her up, and he says, come on, it's not even a close call. But what I'm saying is this.
Lock her up is not killing.
I'm fine with saying there should be no violence. Yeah, I know. So stop inspiring it. That's the point. What I'm saying is you and I disagree. You and I disagree, right? But I would never threaten you personally. I would never say what we hear all the time here, that, hey, Sean, I gotten tired of you cutting me off and wiping your face. When I see you, I'm going to untwist your head like a bottle cap. I don't do that. Why? I would never want anybody
I've heard you a couple of times.
But very rare, and I get upset at myself for doing
Chris,
that.
maybe you have.
I know. Look, I know it's the wrong thing to do. I know it's the wrong thing to do. And I don't think there are enough people in power who feel that way. That's my point. Trump 2.0 is Sean Spicer's new book. You're always welcome here to make the case. I wish you nothing but good things.
Thank you.
We can
I'll never
disagree,
hurt you.
not disagreeable. You could never hurt me. Geraldo,
Brother,
I know.
you could hurt me, but I love you. Take care.
These types of political exchanges usually begin with basic policy differences, but soon turn into deeper debates about trust, responsibility, and how people in the U.S. interpret violence in a deeply divided climate. And what often gets missed is that real-world evidence does not clearly prove that rhetoric alone directly leads to isolated violent acts. For instance, studies from the United States Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center show that most politically motivated attackers are shaped more by personal frustration, online narratives, and psychological instability, rather than one specific political message. And another important aspect is how perception is formed, as research from the Pew Research Center consistently shows that many Americans tend to overestimate how extreme the opposing side really is, often believing it is far more intense than it actually is. And this gap is reinforced by social media algorithms that favor outrage-driven content over balanced information. While history also suggests that even during times of high political tension in the U.S., increases in strong rhetoric have not always resulted in coordinated or ideologically consistent violence. And instead, most incidents remain scattered and driven by individual situations rather than any organized political effort. Which is why a more balanced takeaway is the need for consistency, where violence is condemned across the board, regardless of political alignment, while avoiding selective interpretations of events. Because without that approach, each incident becomes fuel for partisan conflict, rather than a chance to better understand the deeper psychological and social forces behind instability. And in the end, rebuilding trust in institutions and media matters just as much as debating policy itself.